And I've made this argument that it is very, very important to be agnostic in systems integration, especially as it relates to Industry 4.0. And here's why. So I want to tell a vendor story, okay? Because we're going to talk about vendor stuff here in a minute, and then we're going to talk about digital twin. This post that somebody asked me on LinkedIn to comment on this post, so I'm going to comment it on the podcast. So a couple weeks ago, one of the executives for one of my companies comes to me, and I don't work at this company. This is one of the sister companies of 4.0 Solutions. And one of my executives comes to me and he says, "Hey, we were trying to buy a product from this vendor, and this is the email we got back from their business development guy." Okay. And the email says, "Hey, sorry, we've been instructed to not do business with your company." Yeah. Okay. Now, this is a company that we've done. And again, I don't work there, so I'm not in the data. It only got escalated to me when they posited that the reason that decision was made was because of something I said in a podcast or in a video. Okay. Because they know that I own that company. All right. So anyway, I get on the phone, I call that company. When they finally escalated to me, it took them a few days for them to figure out kind of what happened. And then my team at this company says, "Hey, I think you should handle this." They give it to me. I call the company and I talk to their director of business development. And I said, "Hey, what's going on here?" And he said, "Yeah, apparently there's something you said in some YouTube video that pissed off the chief executive here. And they just said, that, not to sell any of your companies anything." And so I said, "Okay." I mean, now
great strategy, by the way. Yeah, let's see how that works.
Yeah. So let me say, so this is what I said. I'm like, first off, I can't tell you how dumb that is. Like just how, I understand the sentiment, right? But from a practical perspective, let's say that the vendor makes PLCs, okay? Which they don't. They're not a PLC company. But let's get it right out of there. It's not Rockwell. It's not Siemens. It's not any of that. Okay. So let's say they make PLCs, right? And this is an Arduino Opta, right? And I need an Arduino Opta for a project I have. And someone from my company, we need it for some project. And Arduino decides, because I say something critical about the Opta in one of my YouTube videos, they're not going to sell us any more Optas. Okay. Okay. From a practical standpoint, you can't,
Eddie,
I'm going to be able to buy the Opta. You're not stopping me from getting the Opta. Like I know, like I could just literally call another vendor and say, "Hey, buy me 4 Optas." And, like it's not, by the way, this happened. Rockwell did do this, by the way. And Rockwell thought they weren't supporting us. Yeah, they were. We just went to another vendor who was happy, was one of your distributors who was happy to sell to us. And they just said, "Just don't tell Rockwell." You know what I mean? It's like,
I know I'm dying to know, but we're not going to share the name.
That shit doesn't work. Okay. Number one,
you're replacing a business decision with an emotional,
right.
Emotional choice.
But let's say, for the sake of argument, that it does work. Okay. Let's say that in fact, you're going to be able to keep me from getting whatever it is you sell. Okay. Which you can't. Okay.
You're lock and a key.
Now, when I was talking to this director of business development, I could tell he did not agree with the decision. I could tell he even said, "Listen, we tried to talk the chairman out of this, blah, blah, blah." And he said, "What I think you knew is you need to have a conversation with the chairman." Right. And I said, that would be a great idea. I'd love to talk to him. And I have a relationship with the chairman. It's not like we've never spoken ever before. We've spoken. I do know him fairly well. What I said was, and this is the bigger thing, you're proving my point. Like you're literally proving my point. Like one of the things that I stress about integrators in Industry 4.0 is that you must be agnostic. Okay. So like look at Flexware Innovation, for example. Flexware is now owned by Hitachi. They are, Hitachi purchased them. Flexware.
I missed that. Yeah.
Yeah. They're now owned by Hitachi.
Was that in the 4.0 newsletter?
They are a premier integrator for inductive automation, or maybe they're in the one above Premier.
God tier.
Yeah, right. So Flexware's got amazing engineers. They're pipeline directly to Purdue. They've got amazing people. In fact, one of the best solutions architects I've ever come across in my career is one of the partners at Flexware. Okay. But Flexware is not agnostic, right? I mean, Flexware will not be able to give you an impartial opinion about Hitachi products or give you an impartial opinion about, right? Because they have strategic partnerships where they are bound. If they say anything negative about their partner, it's going to come back to haunt them. And so what I've said is, if you're going to work with a client, a customer, an integrator like Flexware, and there's lots of integrators out there, most integrators have these affiliations. What they're trying to sell you is a function of their strategic partnerships, not what they think is necessarily best for you. Okay. You should be working with architects who are agnostic, who will evaluate those recommendations based on what is best for the customer, the end user. Okay. And I've made this argument that it is very, very important to be agnostic in systems integration, especially as it relates to Industry 4.0. And here's why. I say we are brain surgeons. Okay. That's what we are. We are brain surgeons. If I go to a brain surgeon and I got a problem, I don't want my doctor recommending a treatment to me based on some kickback they're getting from the person who offers the treatment. I want the recommendation to be based on what is best for my long-term viability. So what I said to this vendor, what I sent to the director of business development was, you're literally proving my point. Like, I preach this all the time. Like, the reason I can't have a strategic partnership with your company is because if I do, and I speak the truth, both good and bad, you're going to punish me. You'll try to use your power over me to punish me for speaking the truth. Now, mind you, let me say
the truth is probably going to move more product than the old school sales shit.
Well, get this. So he pointed out the video, the part that they were upset about. Okay. And I went back and I looked at it, and I wasn't even critical of the company.
You were stating a truism about the industry.
I was stating a truism about the industry, and I happened to mention their company in an architecture I was showing. And that apparently that pissed them off. Now, let me say this. Their chairman has agreed to, we're going to meet and we'll see if we can't, figure out what the problem is and bury the hatchet. And maybe it's all just a big misunderstanding. If it's a big misunderstanding, then the illustration I just made here still stands true. That is, this is part of the reason why you need to be agnostic. If it's not a misunderstanding, I'll eventually just tell the whole story.
Right. So, well, because their inclination was, well, we're not going to sell to you, which is kind of indicative of their mindset. I liked what you did earlier with the inductive automation piece. Like, we love inductive automation, right? We built our careers on it, etc. Like, you're still willing to go there intellectually. I said, this is a thought experiment. This is philosophical here. Like, why is their prices going up? If you were just an inductive, like, this is not a religion that we accept without question, right? But if you were not agnostic, if you were like in bed with inductive, then you would be like, no, of course the price increases are fine. Like, you wouldn't even question it. So like, I think that being agnostic is really important thing, even if it's difficult at times. And by the way, if somebody from inductive automation wanted to come on the podcast, because I've called them, because I've mentioned this, I've mentioned them by name. If there's a guy we're going to have on the podcast. I don't know if I'm allowed to mention his name yet, but there's a guy we're going to have on the podcast in a few weeks who works for one of the huge, one of the really, really big companies. And he's gotten permission from his company to come on the podcast and talk about their offerings and stuff. Now, it's not really risky because kind of they're sort of ahead of the game when it comes to, when you talked about like the big four, right? He's ahead of his company's ahead of the game. So it's not really that risky for him to come on, but he did get permission to come on. And the reason I offered him to be able to come on the podcast is because I call his company out. And if I'm going to do that, I have to be able to stay on, take the heat. Somebody's got to come on here and tell me where I'm wrong. Same thing with inductive automation. If somebody wanted to come and say, hey, here, I'm sure they'll announce why they're doing the price increase. My experience with IA is they've always been on the up and up. I've never, they're a great company. They are. I mean, by the way,
there are people in inductive automation who like me a lot. I have some very, very good friends at inductive automation, and there are people at inductive automation who cannot stand me at all. Okay. So it's not like, there's not like, I am, I get accused of being a cheerleader from inductive automation. Believe me, if you were to go to IA, they would not be saying, Walker's our cheerleader. They would definitely not say that. Okay. Trust me. But I love their platform. And I think of all the companies out there, they do it the best. I do say this: inductive automation needs to be concerned in the market. Okay. And their concern needs to be with Tulip. They need to be concerned with Tulip. They really do. Because Tulip's got the no code part of it down. They got the no code component down.
Yep.
All right.
And they're financially backed, which I think Inductive was bootstrapped, no? Or did Inductive also get
No, Inductive was bootstrapped. I think Steve bootstrapped IA. Because originally with Factory PMI, it was going to be his thing. It was like it was going to be just for his integrator. Because remember,
metrics or
inductive automation started from an integrator, right? I wanted to say this. One of the reasons that I'm such a huge fan of TatSoft also is Mark Taccolini, the founder. Okay. Mark's original platform, what was it called again? Indusoft, right? So he created Indusoft. I think it got sold to Schneider. There was a big lawsuit between the two of them. And then eventually now Indusoft, the original platform that Mark Taccolini developed, is now what is known as Wonderware Edge or InTouch Edge. Okay. So now it's in the Aviva ecosystem. But I have a close relationship with Mark. I've probably known him now maybe 6 years or something, but he's a man of integrity, wants to make a difference, like just big problem solver. Like I'm really big on values and people, right? I'm really big on values and people and like what are people's motivations and that kind of stuff. And one of the big reasons I'm such a huge fan of TatSoft and frameworks is because of Mark. It's also Dave Hellier. I love Dave Hellier to death. So
and 5 years ago, or 4 or 5 years ago, when you said, hey, what's the alternative option to Ignition, there wasn't really a good alternative option outside of frameworks, and
it fell in my lap. I mean, by the way, I thought Litmus Automation was going to be that. I thought Litmus had an opportunity, but it was clear when I originally talked to Litmus that they were building the company to sell it. It wasn't like there wasn't a mission other than
they want to own the whole stack too. Like they want the edge device, and
that's why they partnered with Google and did that whole.